Hello Studybuds, my name is Studybud Joe and welcome to Social Science class. What we're going to be learning on this video is all about human rights and human right violations, alongside some savvy trivia we'll be throwing out later on. At the end of this discussion, Studybuds, you must be able to define human rights, enumerate the different kinds of human rights and examples, comprehend on the types, examples, and effects of human rights violations, have the knowledge about the role of the government regarding human rights. To start off our lecture, Studybuds, a question. What are human rights? Human rights are rights inherent to all human beings, regardless of their nationality, sex, ethnic origin, color, religion, language, or any other status. In short, these are the ground rules for how we should treat one another with equality, respect, and dignity. The 1987 Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines, Article 3, Bill of Rights, was adhered from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly. The bill declares fundamental rights in order to safeguard an individual from violations by the government as well as from groups and individuals. Here, Studybuds, are some of the basic kinds of rights with some of its examples. Civil rights. These are rights that guarantee individuals with equal opportunities and protection under the law, despite of diversity in race, religion, nationality, or personal characteristics. These include the right to life, right to safety, right to privacy, right to education, freedom of press. The next one, Studybuds, are political rights. These are the rights practiced in the formation and administration of a government. They are provided by the Constitution to every citizen, which will serve as their power in participating in the administration, may it be directly or indirectly. Political rights include the right to vote, right to fair trial, right to get elected, right to oppose the government, and the right to seek legal remedy. For those of you Studybuds who are at the legal age to vote, register now and exercise your right during the 2022 elections. Social rights and economic rights. These rights guarantee us with equal social opportunities to live and participate fully in a habitable society and live with dignity. This includes the right to food, right to healthcare, right to housing, right to social security, right to work, right to adequate wages, right to own a property, right to rest and leisure, and the right to fixed hours of work. Alright, Studybuds, so we've learned about human rights. Put this in your notes as we move on to our next topic, human right violations. As we discussed before, Studybuds, human rights play a vital role in the contemporary democracy. It gives citizens the freedom to freely exercise their fundamental rights to live with dignity, in peace, and free from any forms of abuse. However, despite the efforts to eradicate these abuses from happening, there are still many incidents reported from the world over. This may be caused by the citizens themselves or influenced by the state due to flawed judicial system. Some of these abuses are categorized in the following. Physical abuse is the use of physical force against someone in a way that injures or endangers their person. Domestic abuse rarely starts at physical assault. Perpetrators will use physical abuse when they feel they are being challenged. Examples of physical abuse include punching, normally an intro to most fights. Hitting, could include blunt weapons or slaps. Spitting, one of the disgusting and insulting forms of physical abuse, if I do say so myself. Kicking, if you watch Van Damme movies, you know how badly a roundhouse kick could hurt. Strangling, watch wrestling and The Undertaker always has this move. Next up, Studybuds, is psychological violence. Psychological violence includes verbal, emotional, and mental abuse. The abuse can use both verbal and non-verbal communication, and notably, the impact of psychological abuse is often deeper and longer lasting than physical abuse. Most scars are internal rather than external, as some would say. Examples of this kind of abuse include control and shame. Public shaming, gaslighting, and tracking your whereabouts are prime examples. Sarcasm, some would say, is the lowest form of wit. Threats, statements that are intended to scare you from making a choice. For example, I'll kill your dog if you do anything. Silent treatment, the kind of thing toxic relationships do after an argument. Sexual abuse, any situation in which someone is forced to participate in unwanted, unsafe, or degrading sexual activity, even when it's with a partner the person is also having sex with, is sexual abuse. There is no such thing as consensual sex, only sex and rape. Quote to think about. Examples of sexual abuse include rape or forced penetration, sexual assault,
vaginal, anal, or oral, sexual assault using objects, sex toys, broken glass, bottles, and etc. Forcing sex in ways that hurt or follow a physical beating, making someone watch or mimic pornography. Emotional and mental abuse. Emotional and mental abuse is often subtle, and in some cases, victims don't recognize they're being abused. This kind of abuse will wear victims down, often over a long period of time, until they take responsibility for their abuser's actions and behaviors towards them, or simply accept it. Structural abuse. Structural abuse is the process by which an individual is dealt with unfairly by a system of harm in ways that the person cannot protect themselves against, cannot deal with, cannot break out of, cannot mobilize against, cannot seek justice for, cannot redress, cannot avoid, cannot reverse, and cannot change. Now that we've found out the different types of human rights violations, Studybuds, we're going to talk about the history of these violations. Throughout human history, many places across the globe abused their power and became a threat in upholding human rights. There are countries which prohibited media from right to press freedom and were silenced in forms of oppression, threats, and even assassinations. The promoting and protecting of human rights is still a challenge to this date. Here are some historical events from the world over which depicted human rights violations. Violation of right to life, liberty, and security. In 2007, 6,500 individuals were killed in an armed conflict in Afghanistan. Half of the total death toll were killed due to suicide attack committed by armed groups. Slavery. The trade of slavery existed during the imperial era. It was when Africans were brought to America, stripped off of their human rights, and were harshly treated for many centuries. Torture. In May 2002, there are 20 Brazilian prisoners who died inside the detention cell. They protested against the inhumanity, the death of a prisoner, and the infliction perpetrated by state forces. Violation of right to freedom of movement. According to the United Nations, the number of dead refugees to Europe has increased from 2 routes, Turkey to Greece and Africa to Italy. 2016 is said to be the most dangerous year for them. Violation of right to freedom of thought and religion. In Myanmar, the military junta crushed peaceful demonstrations led by monks. This was followed by the closure of monasteries, the confiscation and destruction of property, the shooting and beating, and the intimidation or abduction of their family and friends. Violation of right to freedom and expression. In Russia, political protests against the government were blocked. The independent media was shut down, and NGOs who expressed opposition to the leaders or its policies were threatened. The force used peaceful demonstrations and human rights defenders. Violation of right to equal access to public service. The apartheid system deprived most South Africans of their basic human rights, including their civil, political, social, and economic rights. This system left a large number of people living in poverty. Violation of right to participate in government. In Zimbabwe, hundreds of human rights defenders and opposing members were arrested for attending peaceful rallies. Indeed, there are numerous conflicts caused by violations of human rights. Say there was an armed conflict like massacre. The conflict itself boils down to different violations of human rights. A lot of people were affected and witnessed the massacre that could cause them trauma, leading to different psychological and behavioral problems like post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, sleeping disorders, chronic irritability. Massacres could break down economic infrastructures and civic institutions. When schools, hospitals, markets, and many more are closed, it often results to unemployment, food shortage, and poverty. And eventually, this causes a toll on one's health and well-being, generating malnutrition, sickness, and the inability to do daily tasks. Throughout history, the human rights of the people were violated. Reforms have been created to make the world a better place, and the government plays an important role in promoting and protecting the human rights of the people. States have the legal obligation to protect and promote human rights, including the right to social security, and ensure that people can realize their rights without discrimination. The overall responsibility of the state includes ensuring the due provision of benefits according to clear and transparent eligibility criteria and entitlements, and the proper administration of the institutions and services. Where benefits and services are not provided directly by public institutions, the effective enforcement of the legislative frameworks is particularly important for the provision of benefits and services. It's Did You Know time, Studybuds! Did you know the concept of human rights is said to have originated some 2,500 years ago in modern-day Iraq? King Cyrus the Great freed slaves, established racial equality, and the right to religious choice. Did you know in 2014, more than a third of governments around the world, 62 out of 160, locked up prisoners of conscience, people who were simply exercising their rights and freedoms? Did you know 121 million children and adolescents have never had the chance to attend school or have been forced to drop out?
Did you know the Space Act or the Republic Act number 11313 prohibits catcalling, wolf whistling, intrusive gazing, cursing, taunting, and unwanted invitations in public places? Alright, that's all for today's lesson, Studybuds, and before I let everyone go, let's have a little recap. Firstly, human rights. As we discussed, Studybuds, human rights are rights inherent to all human beings, regardless of their nationality, sex, ethnic origin, color, religion, language, or any other status. In the Philippines, Article 3, or known as the Bill of Rights of the 1987 Constitution, this serves as a safeguard against violations to the state, and of the citizens as well. The said article was adhered from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, proclaimed during the United Nations General Assembly. And don't forget, Studybuds, the basic kinds of human rights are civil rights, political rights, social and economic rights. Next up is the type of human rights violations. These include physical abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, mental and emotional abuse, and structural abuse. And also the examples of human rights violations, which occurred in human history, ranging from slavery, torture, violations of rights to freedom of movement, and so on and so forth. Most importantly, Studybuds, the role of government in the protection and promotion of human rights. It is of great importance that the government as a legal system must spearhead the protection and promotion of human rights, since it is enshrined in the Constitution and agreements of competent states coming from different states and nations. We need to apply our lesson in real life, Studybuds. We young people need to understand equality and know our rights, to better understand both how we should be treated and how we should treat others. Remember the famous golden rule, do not do unto others what you do not want to be done unto yourself. Teaching these topics creates a safe place for students to explore, discuss, challenge, and form their own opinions and values. The knowledge and respect of rights that students gain from this, combined with understanding, respect, and tolerance for differences, can empower them to tackle prejudice, improve relationships, and make the most of their lives. In our ever more diverse and challenging society, it becomes more important to instill young people with these positive and open-minded attitudes. And as a last note, Studybuds, make sure to exercise every day, especially exercising your rights. This is Studybud Joe, and see you on our next lecture.